Angus Taylor takes over a Liberal Party in crisis in what he calls a change or die moment. So is this a real reset or another step towards extinction? The first test is coming fast, and this morning we'll hear from the new Deputy Liberal leader, Jane Hume. I'm David Speers. Welcome to Insiders. Winning the party room may turn out to be the easy part. Now, Angus Taylor faces a much tougher challenge, winning back the country. His plan involves a harder line on immigration, free market economics and a reckoning with past mistakes. Will it cut through? Well, Sussan Ley departed with dignity, but is leaving behind a dangerous by-election. It's an early test for a new leader trying to reset a battered brand.
The federal Liberal leadership saga is headed for a showdown.
It has to come back to the leadership.
We are facing an existential crisis.
If you have a rabbit in your hat, it is time to reach down for that bunny.
Liberals are on tenterhooks tonight, waiting for Angus Taylor to challenge Sussan Ley.
That's right to go.
Half of the party room supports the member for Hume and the other half have met him.
Tonight I've tendered my resignation as a member of the Shadow Cabinet. But we can't mince with words. I don't believe Sussan Ley is in a position to be able to lead the party.
I'm headed out for the evening. Beautiful day here in Canberra.
There's no peace in this place.
I'm one of the strange guys that still think loyalty's worth something.
I had to resign my position on the Shadow Ministry.
Tendering my resignation as the Shadow Minister.
Resign my Shadow Ministry portfolios.
I don't believe she has been given a reasonable opportunity.
Angus Taylor has played his hand and will challenge Sussan Ley for the leadership.
It's a good day to be a Conservative. Sussan's got the choice of how her leadership ends.
James McGrath and Leah Blythe are the latest Liberals to quit the Shadow Ministry.
It looks to me like, in the modern Liberal Party, an incompetent bloke beats a woman any day of the week.
We have been in a death spiral.
Angus is going to step in the ring and the Australian people are going to say, son, show me something.
I'm running to be the leader of the Liberal Party because I believe that Australia is worth fighting for.
Our Liberal priority must be to protect our way of life.
That list of resignations is now at 10.
And it doesn't matter who sits in that chair, the problem isn't the leader, the problem is that whoever sits there will just be another Liberal.
After days of speculation, Mr Taylor ousted Sussan Ley.
For those who supported me today, I thank you. For those who did not, I genuinely have no hard feelings. I look forward to stepping away completely and comprehensively from public life. Thank you.
It is the greatest honour of my life to be elected as the leader of the Liberal Party.
We know the challenge that faces us. We know that many people have lost faith.
Our borders have been open to people who hate our way of life.
No one will ever be as strong as one nation on immigration.
I have always believed that good migration is good for this country.
Not left, not right. We're taking our party forward.
We had the first great cappuccinos in this country. That's what I want to see. Thank you very much.
Well, let's bring in our panel. We are joined this morning by Jennifer Hewett, National Affairs columnist with the Australian Financial Review, Jacob Greber, ABC 730's political editor, and welcome to the couch, Natassia Chrysanthos, political correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Good to have you with us. Let's start with what happened. Jennifer, it ended up being a big win for Angus Taylor in the party room. Why have the Liberals made this emphatic change?
Well, it's the old story of division, despair, desperation, creating a kind of self-fulfilling doom loop, really. And the more that the Liberals were unable to gain traction in the polls, the more the polls got worse, the more division there was, and in the end, then it was of course all imploded by the Nationals leaving the coalition. The polls just got worse and worse. And Angus Hastie started leadership manoeuvres, and in the end, you know, I think everybody agreed the situation was untenable. And the doom loop is a good way of putting it, I suppose, Jacob. Things were clearly getting worse after a disastrous election result last year, but was it all Sussan Ley's fault? Was she given a fair go?
or did she have her share of mistakes?
I think it's a blend of all of those things, frankly. She never got the authority that a leader needs. Remember, she only won by a few votes in that original ballot. A number of those votes left the party room. One of them didn't make it into Parliament. Others were senators who left. So from the get-go, she had that question mark. That's normally not, you know, Tony Abbott only had one vote and he went on to become Prime Minister. So it doesn't necessarily cruel you, but in this case it was a poor start. Then of course the coalition's splitting. I don't think Sussan Ley, she's the first Liberal that I can think of who had a really, really difficult National Party to deal with, unlike any of her predecessors. So that was a big part of it. But she also carries it herself, her judgment, the things she chose to emphasise backfired. T-shirts, banging the table about Penny Wong's lack of tears. It all compounds, it becomes a doom loop. It's, it's the opposite of a halo effect.
Yeah, well, look, Natassia, you wrote a really good piece, I think, about Sussan Ley and her leadership, and you identified, I think, this issue of, was it ever clear what she stood for, what she was willing to die in a ditch for, or was that part of her problem, that she kept giving too much on net zero and other issues to the Conservatives?
Well, perhaps part of her problem as well is I think she did start off with some pretty strong statements, you know, about winning women back, about kind of being proactive in multicultural communities. You know, we'd had this election debate in the final weeks over Welcome to Country. She started her National Press Club with an acknowledgement of country as a...
And turned up at the National Press Club, which itself was significant.
Yeah, so there was this kind of... She said in her first press conference that she wanted to move, or that she thought government was formed in the sensible centre, and there were all these kind of hints that that's what she was doing, and she wanted to start everything from scratch. And I think as soon as she started doing that, it created a bit of a vacuum, and then rather than letting her lead that process, we had a bunch of people, including people on the front bench, such as Andrew Hastie and Jacinta Price, filling that space with their own ideas and agendas. And I think as soon as that started happening, the Liberals kind of cemented into what felt like two camps. There was this hasty and waiting camp with the kind of stuff that Hume and Price were saying about immigration and so-called mass migration, which was not the language that Ley wanted to use. And so her kind of strong positioning on some of these things at the beginning, I think, fell away. Then you had the net zero showdown where Ley never articulated a position at all. And so I think from that point, it became less clear what she personally stood for.
Yes,
you know, compared to...
Yeah, in trying to keep everybody kind of together, the party ended up confused and to the public looking just as though they didn't have any policies. And particularly in this hyped-up, supercharged era, you can't have, you know, a year-long wait, we'll announce our policies later, we're going to have a review of everything. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that anymore.
I don't think she had natural allies around her at any real point. I mean, there were, her deputy obviously did back her, supported her, but I'm talking about a broader sense in the Liberal Party and the National Party. She never had those allies, so I think people will feel aggrieved by that, who are upset that the first female leader of the Liberal Party has been torn down so quickly.
Yeah. So just on that, I mean, and we will come to where they go from now, how they pull themselves out of this hole under Angus Taylor and Jane Hume, who we're about to hear from. But just quickly, Natassia, this morning, Charlotte Mortlock has quit the Liberal Party. This is someone who, for years, founded the Hilmers Network to try and attract and promote women in the Liberal Party. She's now quit. Why is this significant?
Well, and she was a former Coalition staffer as well, a former Sky journalist. She started this grassroots network, which was intended to really boost female representation in the Liberals. And she's quit the network, quit the party. The backdrop of that is, of course, Ley's departure, but it's not Ley being turfed on its own. I think it's the optics around all of that, and I think for a lot of women, that image of 6 Liberal men, including Andrew Hastie, Angus Taylor, John O'Donoghue and James Patterson, gathering at a home in Melbourne on the morning of a funeral for another Liberal woman to discuss what would happen to Ley without having articulated anything to Ley personally. Patterson was still at that point publicly supporting her. I think that was a sign to women that, or the women I've spoken to, that Ley wasn't being afforded a lot of respect. And then I think with Charlotte in particular, had been involved in the discussion around gender quotas at the New South Wales level for federal representation. But she was part of a group of 6 Liberal women in New South Wales who had been working on this proposal for quotas. Quotas are a very, very hot topic
contentious in the Liberal Party.
In the Liberal Party. And what we also saw this month was that proposal be dumped from the agenda, according to reporting in The Australian.
Didn't even get a vote on it.
No, and I think that probably showed.
Well, there you go. We'll come back to where they go from here. Time to talk to the new Deputy Liberal leader, Jane Hume, and as she and Angus Taylor try to win back the millions of Australians who've abandoned the party in recent years, there's no doubt of both the enormity of the challenge ahead and the consequences of failure.
There is much work to be done to win back supporters and everyday Australians. But just as Australians have put faith in us before, I'm confident we can restore their faith in us again. It's on us to regain that trust and earn it, but the choice is simple for the Liberal Party: change or die, and I choose change.
Jane Hume, welcome to the program.
Thanks, David. Good to be with you.
Congratulations on your election as Deputy Leader. Is this just a change of leadership, though, or are you prepared to drive policy change that even might upset some in your own party?
David, this is a genuine change, a genuine reset for the Liberal Party, and it's a change and a reset that was necessary because we're facing an existential crisis. The Liberal Party has had its worst results since its formation in 1944. Something has to give. Australians are rightly aggrieved at the moment, and you can see why they're looking elsewhere, because they weren't finding answers in the messages and the policies and the positions that we were taking. That's why there has been a change. That's why Angus Taylor and I will lead the team to the next election to make sure that we protect Australians' standard of living, restore Australian standard of living and protect their way of life. That's what they're telling us is so important, and that's exactly what we'll do.
I want to come to where you're willing to change. Just on the mistakes, though, that you've admitted about that election. You've admitted mistakes on opposing tax cuts and work from home arrangements. Why should voters now believe that we can trust your judgment when you got those calls so wrong?
David, everybody makes mistakes, and I think if you weren't going to go through a period of reflection about what you would have changed after an election loss, well, then you're fooling yourself. Australians asked us to do that reflection, and that was writ large in the result. What's important now, though, is the future, what it is that Australians expect from a strong coalition and a Liberal Party that knows what it stands for, a Liberal Party that speaks with conviction and not with convenience, and expresses those convictions with its policy suite that reflects the values and the priorities of all Australians.
So I want to explore what change you're open to when it comes to tax. Are you open to any change in your approach to tax on the tax breaks that are there for property investors?
David, I'm not going to go into the intricacies of all policies 48 hours after a leadership change. We haven't even had a shadow cabinet meeting yet. We haven't even announced who the shadow cabinet are. But what I will say is what all Liberals know instinctively, that the Liberal Party should always be and must always be a party of lower taxes, because we know that when taxes are lower, Australians get a chance to get ahead. We know that when taxes are lower, more investment comes to our country and more people within our country invest within our country. We know when taxes are lower, the economy grows without creating inflation. That's what we need to see in this country, a restoration of our standard of living and our way of life.
As you say, you haven't yet appointed a shadow cabinet, had these discussions, but the reason I ask is yesterday you were standing alongside Angus Taylor when he made clear you would fight any change to the capital gains tax discount. Is that a captain's call, or is that something that you'll come back to consider?
I think that that discussion has been had in the party room for some months. We've known this was coming from Labor, that they're reaching back into the grab bag of higher tax policies that Bill Shorten took to a previous election that he lost. We know that Labor love to raise taxes, that they will always come after your money when they run out of theirs. And that's why we're going to oppose an increase on the capital gains tax to residential houses. Now, there's a good reason for this.
Sorry, that was already discussed in the party room.
You create less of us.
No, okay, sorry to interrupt.
Was this discussed by colleagues
already?
Yes.
That decision was taken under Sussan Ley's leadership.
this has been an issue that has been ongoing for some time, whether it be changes to negative gearing, whether it be changes to capital gains tax. And Liberals know instinctively when we talk to each other that we are a party of lower taxes, and that if you tax something, there is less of it. If you tax residential housing, there will be less of it. That would be a disaster. No one has yet come out and demonstrated that a wholesale change to capital gains tax on residential housing will create more houses or provide more rental opportunities for rental houses for those that are yet to purchase their first home.
Okay, so no
that
change.
That would be a disaster.
Okay.
Now, just yesterday, David, so just yesterday, I was speaking to a builder down in Goulburn who was saying to me that 2 years ago he was doing 20 house and land packages per year. Last year he did 2. We know that houses are not being built at a rate fast enough in Australia to keep up with our growth. This is a real problem because that's part of the Great Australian Dream. We want to restore that Great Australian Dream. If you tax it, there will be less houses, fewer houses, not more houses.
Okay, so no change in your position on tax breaks for property investment. Are you at least open to any bold tax reform that might create winners or losers, or will you keep playing it safe on tax?
Well, I think more of the same clearly isn't good enough. Our economy is not growing at a fast enough rate. Australians are feeling that every single day. We're now seeing even the slightest increase in demand turn into inflationary pressures, and that's because we simply haven't got the productivity that is going to drive growth without inflation. That will certainly be something that I want to focus on, because without increased productivity, Australian standard of living will continue to go backwards, as it has done under this government just over the last 4 years. Our standard of living has gone back around 10%. And I know you've heard me say it before, but it's entirely true. If Australians are feeling poorer, it's not all in their heads. They in fact are poorer than they were 4 years ago. Now that has to turn around. Australians deserve to have that hope and optimism that used to be embedded in our economy and in our society, and that's been sucked, the life's been sucked out of them.
Okay.
It's on us now to demonstrate that we can put forward a policy agenda that will restore that hope, that optimism, so that people know that the chances of their family being better off next year than they were last year is much higher.
Okay, it's a question of how you do it though. There's another big tax idea out there that Pauline Hanson supports at one end, the unions are pushing on the other, and that's taxing gas exports a whole lot more. Is that, and that could free up, or that could create revenue that you could help working Australians with lower taxes. Is that idea something you're open to?
Well, as I said, instinctively we will always be a party of lower taxes, because if you tax something, there is less of it. But energy policy is certainly somewhere that we need to put our focus, because energy prices have gone up around 38% under this Labor government. And at the same time, we're getting forecasts suggesting that they're going to go up by around 24% more just in the next 12 months alone.
Okay.
No wonder our industries are suffering and closing down around us.
Sorry, the question was about taxing gas exports. You are open to increasing that tax?
We are always open to lowering taxes. We don't want to see taxes increased. But energy is going to be a really important part of that conversation. Right. Making sure that we have energy abundance in Australia, increasing supply of energy to lower prices of energy is profoundly important.
Does that mean lower taxes for gas producers?
No, I'm not making policy on the run on Sunday morning, 48 hours after I've become deputy leader. David, I'm sure that is not an enormous surprise.
I'm just trying to tease out where you're willing to change.
Liberals instinctively, and certainly Angus Taylor and I are instinctively will always say lower taxes are better than higher taxes, and they're better for all Australians. But energy abundance is what is going to bring energy prices down.
Okay, a big issue for a lot of families, childcare, and you and Angus Taylor on Friday did touch on this, ruling out support for universal childcare and supporting more choice. Should parents receive a taxpayer subsidy for using a nanny? Is that what you're talking about?
Again, I'm not going to be talking about specific policies on air 48 hours after I've been appointed the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, before we've even had our first shadow cabinet meeting. But I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that childcare as it is, isn't working for working Australians. It isn't working because it's costing around $16 billion a year to taxpayers. At the same time, we're subsidising both the workers and the users of childcare. No wonder it's becoming so out of reach for every Australian. We want to make sure that we have a system that not only makes sure that families that want to return to the workplace and have their children cared for have that opportunity to do so, but they should also have a choice as to how they go about doing that. I think that that's a pretty obvious response.
If you're broadening the subsidies, though, that could cost a lot more, couldn't it?
That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what I'm saying at all. I do think, though, that Australians deserve a choice as to how they have their children cared for while they go back to work. Because we want Australians, and particularly women, to have that opportunity to participate fully in the economy and participate fully in society. And we also want to make sure that we have quality childcare that makes sure our children have the best start in life. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there is a one-size-fits-all approach. That's the way to deal with that.
You mentioned energy. It was only a few months ago you were one of those who lost the battle inside the Liberal Party when it came to dumping the net zero target. You argued the electorate had already made its mind up on this and that ditching net zero would be a gift to Labor, as you put it. Has your view changed on that?
The party room has decided what our energy direction is going to be. We're going to focus on bringing prices down for all Australians because the policy that Labor has brought forward is holding our economy back. We won't be re-prosecuting that case in the party room. There is no reason why we cannot create more energy, an increased supply of energy to bring those prices down, as well as look after our environment and reduce emissions.
Do you need some sort of policy, though, on climate change to bring down emissions?
Well, if people were open-minded to the idea of lifting the moratorium on nuclear energy, which is a bill that I brought forward as a backbencher, so that we can have a zero emissions technology introduced into our country, as every other developed nation has either done or is in the process of doing, well, then that would add to that energy abundance that would bring prices down over time.
So nuclear is the answer to climate change?
That's not what I said, that's what you said,
no,
David.
I'm just asking what your climate policy is, and you talked about nuclear. Is there anything beyond nuclear to bring emissions down? David, I'm not announcing policy 48 hours after having been elected Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party before our first Shadow Cabinet meeting, but what I will say is it's absolutely crazy to have an ideological approach towards energy because it's energy that drives our economy. We want to see our economy flourish and thrive so that all Australians can see better days ahead. For voters, though, who've gone to the Teals, do you need some sort of policy offering to win them back?
There is no doubt that caring for our environment, looking after our oceans, looking after our soil, looking after our water is profoundly important. And reducing emissions is a part of that, but it's not the only thing that's important to Australians. What's important to Australians is an opportunity that they can see to get ahead, that they can see to look after themselves, to look after their families, to restore that optimism to what it is that they do every single day. That's what Angus Taylor and I are focused on.
One thing Angus Taylor has been talking a lot about over the last 48 hours is immigration. He wants to protect our way of life. What values aren't currently protected with the existing citizenship test?
Well, I think that we can safely say that over the last few years we've seen our immigration poorly managed. It's run out of control. Around 500,000 people coming to the country per year has put pressure on our services, pressure on our health system, pressure on our infrastructure, on our roads, and certainly pressure on housing as well. A reset on immigration is profoundly important. We want to see a lower number of people come to our country, but we also want to raise the standards. Now, what that looks like, I'm not going to get into the details today. But I think all Australians know that if you come here, coming to Australia, living in Australia is one of the greatest gifts that could ever be given to anybody, which is why we want to make sure that the people that come here share our beliefs, share our respect for the rule of law and for democracy. And if you don't, well, then the door should be shut. We want people here that are going to contribute, as generations of migrants have done in the past.
But again,
it's about a reset. It's not about a radical.
Yeah, sorry. When you talk about these values, the current citizenship test already has questions that must be passed on democratic beliefs, rights, liberties, the rule of law, values of freedom, respect and equality. Is that not enough? What's missing here at the moment?
Well, it's a good question. I have to say, having gone to a number of citizenship ceremonies over the years, and most recently on Australia Day, there's nothing that pleases me more than seeing people adopt Australia as their home and prescribing to those core beliefs, to those freedoms, to choice, to personal responsibility, to an obligation to make our country better. But somewhere, something is failing, and I think that we can see that. All Australians can see that. So the way to reinforce it, again, that's a policy decision for another day after I have met with the Shadow Cabinet and spoken about this with all of my colleagues. But Australians are telling this on the street every single day. They love living here, but they want to protect our way of life as well as restore our standard of living.
And on the numbers, the Coalition went to the election promising to reduce the net overseas migration by 100,000. Do you think we need more or fewer skilled workers in Australia?
Well, we know that skilled workers have added so much to our way of life. They've contributed so much to our society and to our economy. We know we need skilled migrants. This is not about shutting the door to everybody. That's a simple slogan for parties of grievance. What we want to do is make sure we have a well-managed migration program that brings in the skills that we need, but we do need to lower the number and allow our infrastructure, our healthcare, our roads and our housing to have a breather, to catch up to where we are, because Labor have allowed the immigration policy, their immigration policy, to run out of control, and all Australians are paying the price. Immigration should be something that raises our standard of living, and unfortunately it's not. At the moment, it's changing our way of life. We don't want to see that. We want to see immigrants that come to our country welcomed to our country because they adopt our core values and they contribute to our society and our economy.
Just a few other quick questions. Deputy leaders usually get to choose their portfolio. What will you choose?
I won't spoil the surprise. I think I'll let the leader do his announcement, of the Shadow Cabinet and all of those positions in due course. But what I will say is I am particularly interested in making sure that I have an opportunity to talk about what's important to me, which is making sure that we have a far more productive economy, that we can grow the pie for everybody. Because let's face it, what's happened in the last few years is that people have moved to the populist left and to the populist right because they feel that they are being left behind. Both the populist left and the populist right do not have the solutions. Only a Liberal Party who wants to see the pie grow, who wants to make sure that every Australian has the opportunity to get ahead, that they can see that next year is going to be better than the last. Only the Liberal Party only Coalition has the answers to their problems. That's the message that Angus Taylor and I want to deliver to all Australians.
A big focus on productivity. That's a tease as to where you might land in your portfolio. Look, has the Coalition, a new Coalition agreement between the leaders been settled yet? And when will those suspended Nationals return to the Shadow Ministry?
Yeah, it's a bit early for that, David, I have to admit. I know that Angus and David Littleproud have already had conversations, which is really important. They have known each other for a very long time and worked together very closely indeed. But again, I'll leave those conversations to later once the Shadow Cabinet has been appointed.
And on the by-election that's coming in Sussan Ley's seat of Farrer, she's held the seat for more than 20 years. Would you rather the Nationals not run in the seat?
No, look, this is all a conversation for party organisations. One of the things about being a member of the Liberal Party is that it's Liberal Party members that get to choose who runs for the Liberal Party in any particular seat.
Would you like to see a woman selected for the Liberals?
It's going to be tough. I would like to see many more women pre-selected for the Liberals right across the country, as they were at the last election, unfortunately, because the electoral tide worked so badly against us. Those incredibly talented women, and there were droves of them, didn't get up. In Farrer, when you have the retirement of a popular local member, it's always going to be a tough ask, but that will be a conversation that both our leaders and our organisations must have.
And just finally, we mentioned Charlotte Mortlock, the director of the Hilmer Network, has quit the party and the Hilmer Network. What's the significance of that, do you think?
Oh, it is significant. Charlotte has been a great contributor and a great voice for women that hold Liberal values. And I think that this is a really sad moment. I hope that the Hilmers network continues on. Sometimes when you have a big personality like Charlotte at the helm of an organisation that's pushing for change within a party, and that person leaves or moves on, the organisation or that she has built sometimes disappears with her. I hope that that is not the case, because I think that there is a real opportunity for women's voices in the Liberal Party, and it's on us to make sure that we demonstrate to Australian women that the Liberal Party is the place for them, that we represent their hopes, their dreams and their aspirations. That's certainly what my aim will be over the next coming weeks, months, years, and that's certainly what we're going to take to the next election.
Deputy Liberal Leader Jane Hume, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, David.
Well, coming up, the fallout from the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. First, let's get back to our panel. We're joined once more by Jennifer Hewett, the National Affairs columnist with the Australian Financial Review, Jacob Greber, ABC 730's political editor, and Natassia Chrysanthos, the political correspondent with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. So a bit just unpack from that, Jennifer, on tax. It does sound like no change to the party's position on those property investment tax breaks, capital gains tax, negative gearing and so on. Clearly a focus on we always want lower taxes, but they're going to need, aren't they, to start thinking about and producing some big ideas here soon.
Yes, they're going to need some big ideas. It's always hard from opposition to come up with a tax reform package other than saying, yes, we believe in lower taxes, etc. But I do think the government is very vulnerable on this. Of course, there is the appeal that people will say, oh, you know, this is not fair, intergenerational things. It's capital gains tax makes it more expensive for people to compete with investors and things like that. But they're not putting it as part of a general tax reform package. That is Jim Chalmers' biggest weakness. That is the vulnerability for the government, I think, because they'll, in the same way that Anthony Albanese says just another Liberal, they'll be saying just another Labor tax. So I do think there's room for the Liberals to make headway on this, but it'll be very, very tricky politics. And I think they'll therefore have to come up with some kind of way of compensating for that by talking about lower personal income tax. How detailed that have to be about that, we'll see.
Now, I want to just raise this issue of taxing the gas exports, Jacob, because as you know, last year before the Treasurers' Roundtable, the ACTU put this on the table. Big idea. Tax those gas exports with a flat 25% rate. And I want to show you this. It's from the Australia Institute. They commissioned Redbridge to do a poll on this amongst various voters. The biggest support, the strongest support for this flat 25% tax on gas exports is the Greens voters there. But next is One Nation voters. They like this idea a lot, followed by Labor and the Coalition. It's interesting where the two ends of the political spectrum, the Greens and One Nation, really come together on this idea.
The gas thing is fascinating to watch. As you said, the ACTU made it very clear that this was one of the priorities that it wanted the government to pursue in this term. And remember, they got pretty much everything they wanted in the first Albanese term. So what the ACTU says carries a lot of weight in this realm. They've made it very clear that the gas tax is something they're after. The industry is going to have to get its skates on, because those numbers tell you there is a popular wave here behind this sort of idea of hitting those exports. There are lots of arguments about whether that works or not that are legitimate, but that's where the politics is headed, and it's going to be challenging for the Liberal Party to counter that argument. They'll be arguing the interests of the big gas companies, and remember, their credibility on this.
They'll also be arguing that there'll be less gas as a result.
Well, yeah, but the problem for the Liberal Party is their credibility on this issue was shot at the last election when Peter Dutton took a policy that actually goes into this realm of penalising exports to try and get more gas into the domestic market. Labor will feel quite emboldened by the result of that campaign and how it fell apart. So, yeah, Angus Taylor's going to have to get his arguments straight on that one. And just to go back quickly to the capital gains tax, I mean, I probably don't agree with you that that's a danger for the government. I think there is an intergenerational piece. I'm sorry. We're old mates, we go back a long way, but I think actually the government's probably on a pretty solid wicket here with CGT, and even just listening to Jane Hume a second ago, she had that example of the builder saying he had 20 homes a year ago and now he's got 2. Well, it can't be the capital gains tax issue that's changed that, because nothing's changed on that score.
No, because it's so expensive to build houses.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of pressures. There's also the availability of skilled workers to build the houses as well, which ties us to the immigration issue. Natassia, immigration clearly is the one thing Angus Taylor wants to talk a lot about at the outset here, and clearly he's talking to those One Nation voters who've drifted across to One Nation. Is it clear, though, in listening to Jane Hume, what exactly they'll do, or is this just messaging at the moment?
Yeah, I think it shows just how much work they've got to do in this space. A couple of things. One, the Liberals have been working on an immigration policy for the last little while. Like, this was the kind of big piece of work that Sussan Ley had fast-tracked after the net zero debate. That policy was ready in December, then, you know, Bondi happened, expenses scandal, it got pushed back to this year. It was tweaked slightly after Bondi to make it a little bit tougher as well. And then I think if Ley hadn't been rolled, you know, we might have seen that sometime this week. So there were things that they have been looking at in terms of toughening up. We had a conversation about tougher screening of people and whether that's kind of done through social media, for
scraping their social media.
Yeah, this idea which you were asking about, do you strengthen a citizenship test or an Australian values statement? There is an Australian values statement that...
For permanent residents.
Yeah, so do you turn that into a test? That's very cumbersome and labour intensive, so perhaps not. They were also looking at scaling up deportations, because we've got about 100,000 people in the country who have kind of moved through the entire visa process, who have applied for asylum, had their claims rejected. Some of those are contested.
That'd be a Trumpy sort of
yeah, but they've
not
been
just appealing for asylum, though. It's also just, you know, they're students and they want to stay longer, etc.
Yeah. So they get, but the asylum, sorry, that's the 100,000 number. Like, it's a lot of people just in that.
But the idea that you'd round them up and deport them is.
But that has also been something that they've been considering. So I think what'll be interesting is what Jane Hume and Angus Taylor come up with that's different to what Sussan Ley has been working on, because they are promising change and to get tougher on this issue.
Yeah. But nobody knew what Sussan Ley was working on, so I think they can get away with that.
Yes. Well, I guess there are also some people in the Liberals who do know what Sussan Ley was working on, so we will find out.
I'm a little bit struck by how... Sorry, I'm just a little bit struck by how Angus Taylor and now Jane Hume have not really gone to the more extreme kind of anti-immigration policies you might have heard in the past. I think they're trying to balance the fact that business does actually need migrants, they need skilled migrants. I think there's a bit of subtlety in that approach. The question in my mind is whether that is enough or good enough for the right wing that wants to be able to take the fight to One Nation on this issue. So I think they're straddling.
But a lot of it is also, there's the skilled migration, Australia's permanent migration, which is at 185,000. Now, they'll probably reduce that a bit. But the other issue is where the big increase has been, is it international students and working holiday makers. That's a very kind of different issue, and so they're going to have to radically scale that back if they really want to make a difference to those numbers. That has come down, net overseas migration, from about 500,000, which was, I think everybody agrees, too high, but people still have, it's now around 300,000. But it, you know, when it becomes linked with the housing crisis, that's when it becomes so politically potent, and it has been.
I want to turn to this by-election. We don't have a date for it yet. Sussan Ley says she'll formally resign in the next couple of weeks. So I assume by-election probably before the May budget. And this is going to be messy for the Liberals, no doubt about it. I want to show you the results at last year's election there in the seat of Farrer. So it's regional New South Wales in the south of the state. The Liberal vote, Sussan Ley, just over 43%. Look at who ran second. This is Michelle Millthorpe, the independent, backed by Climate 200. So about 20% of the vote. Then Labor, One Nation, Greens. Now, what's changed since then? The One Nation surge has come off the Liberals. So that 6.6% they got last year, you'd think would be much higher. They'll be wanting to prove that they can turn their polls into something real. I'm told Labor won't run in this by-election. They've already made the call, is what I understand, that Labor won't run. So that vote then would largely go into, you would think, the independent, Michelle Millthorpe, who absolutely is running again, has an ad out this morning, a well-funded ad, pretty slick messaging already. Liberals have still got to choose a candidate. The Nationals could well come into the mix as well. They're free to run because there's no incumbent under their deal.
in their minds, it's their old seat. Like that's the
this
seat.
This was Tim Fisher's seat.
Right. So they'll be under pressure to try and reclaim that seat.
Well, indeed, and I think Bridget McKenzie has spoken about this on the podcast this week. I spoke to Fiona Scott, the Liberal Party Vice President, and she had a pretty strong message to the Nationals about whether they should or shouldn't run.
I hear you, Bridget McKenzie. I hear you on Tim Fisher. I'm calling you out, Bridget. But our whole party was founded in Albury. There they are talking with Sussan whilst making preparations in her own seat. I mean, you can understand why the relationship was a bit fraught. But, you know, so it'll be interesting to see how Angus and David Littleproud sort this out. It doesn't help when Bridget comes straight out and says, it's our seat.
Sounds like you're saying it should just be one. It should just be a Liberal candidate.
There can be only one.
There can be only one. So the reunited coalition.
Oh, it might be none of them.
Will face
it might be someone else, One Nation Independent. I mean, those numbers look very dangerous for
I think there's been some expectations management already from Angus Taylor saying this is going to be very difficult. And so I think it was, nobody could blame Sussan Ley, certainly publicly, for abandoning ship, you know, pretty quickly. But she certainly laid a booby trap for Angus. But I think what they'll keep on saying is that, you know, of course it's going to be very difficult for them, and it would be actually unlikely in this circumstance for them to win against a strong community independent. Because the Liberals,
she could have waited. Actually, she could have waited.
That's what I mean.
But then it would have been much more Angus's by
that would have been Angus.
Now
that's
he can
right.
say,
yes,
look, this reflects the...
that's why there's expectations.
Does it put the heat on him and the party to come up with some of these ideas?
Absolutely.
Oh, it does.
We're talking there about, we've got to work through this and this and this and this.
Well, what are they going to go in selling at this point? And especially if you do have a Liberal and a Nationals candidate, is the expectation that they fight each other and make arguments against each other? You've got this recently reunited coalition.
I think they just need to have a clear message on things, not just need to, but they'll have a clear message on immigration, for example, and, you know, and then talk very vaguely about taxes and standard of living.
Some good new slogans as well. I think we've heard them over the last couple of days.
But I mean, he needs to come up with something fast anyway, whether or not there was Farah. This will be a test of it, but he needs to make some big policy announcements soon.
Now, the Shadow Ministry, what do you think of Jane Hume giving a tease there? The productivity is her sort of passion and focus. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't have the Treasury portfolio even if you're in opposition in the Senate. Can you? She wouldn't be Shadow Treasurer.
No, she wouldn't be Shadow Treasurer.
So some sort of productivity?
Industry, something like that.
Role, maybe?
Industry, presumably, something like that.
Is Tim Wilson set for the Shadow Treasury?
I think so, pretty well. I think it's pretty obvious that they need somebody to go up against Jim Chalmers who will be at least able to kind of challenge him on every point and have a, you know, as they say, a bit of mongrel in him. And, you know, Chalmers is a very, very good performer and he's basically been able to really get away with a lot of stuff that the Liberals have not been able to touch him on. So they need a change.
Tim Wilson sort of divides, doesn't he? People love him or they hate him, but in this context, as they said in the old Monkey show, he's irrepressible. And I'm sure he really badly wants it.
Look, he wouldn't waste the opportunity, I'm sure. Angus Taylor will also want to bring back Andrew Hastie, Jacinda Nampijinpa Price. He's going to need to make some room for these people to come back in. Maybe Sarah Henderson as well.
And who he puts in immigration, if immigration's kind of been earmarked as the next big thing, you know, that will really influence the tone and the tenor of this debate going forward. You know, you had a lot of Liberals unhappy with Paul Scar's very moderate approach to the portfolio in that he called out his colleagues' use of mass migration. What will be the language of their new immigration minister? How will that go head to head with Pauline Hanson, who on Friday was already saying, you know, which countries are you going to stop coming in?
So, like Andrew Hastie.
I mean,
Andrew Hastie in immigration, for example, would be, you know, a very powerful counter to the One Nation vote, but would put a lot of other people off. So that's a tricky one.
I want to turn to the visit of Isaac Herzog, the Israeli president. He's now left the country, but while he was here, we saw quite the protests. I think we got some pictures of them here, particularly in Sydney, those clashes between the pro-Palestinian protesters and police. They were quite ugly scenes. Some of the confrontations we saw there, some of the police behaviour has come in for quite a deal of criticism. Muslims praying who were broken up and removed as well. Jennifer, just explain to us the role the New South Wales government's protest laws have played here.
Well, the New South Wales government, unlike the Victorian government, has had strict rules which they've made much stricter about when and where you can protest. And I do think that the New South Wales police and the government in this way, that they went out of their way to try and make a compromise solution with the protesters. They wanted them to be able to march in a different street. They wanted them to be in Hyde Park. The protesters said no, they would go to Town Hall, but they wouldn't march. Now, they then broke that commitment, not all of them, but many of them, and that's what led to the ugly scenes.
Some of those scenes that we've seen of the...
No, it doesn't excuse some of those scenes, but as the Premier said, they were in the midst of a riot. So I don't think Australians like seeing those scenes at all, but I think that it's very clear that the protesters, in that sense, were quite happy to provoke the police.
And the Prime Minister has called for an explanation too on particularly the breaking up of the Muslim prayer as well.
And I think that kind of complicates as well some of the images coming out, because when you do have vision of people praying and being moved on, that it's not the same image as a kind of protester coming up against police. So I think that has made this one more difficult, and I think that's why you've seen Albanese's language. I think he was very careful to say that that is quite concerning the other day.
Yeah, the one thing he's making no apology for, though, Jacob, was inviting Herzog at all. And I think there was quite a powerful moment in the Parliament when he got an answer from, it was one of the independents about this, or no, it was from the Greens, Elizabeth Watson-Brown about this, and he strongly defended the invitation. And here's a Prime Minister who's copped it for months over the Bondi terrorist attack and not doing enough on anti-Semitism. He's copped that from the right, and now copping it for inviting Herzog here from the left. And he really pleaded with both sides to turn the temperature down. What did you make of that moment? Because there was emotion and anger there from the PM that we don't often see.
I know we spent the whole week talking about the leadership stuff on the other side, but that was the biggest moment of the week from the Prime Minister. He, as you said, not only did he not resile from inviting or be apologetic for inviting Herzog, explaining that he was here really, as an act of pastoral care to a community that's been hurt, he also took it as an opportunity to sort of stick it up the left again by saying, look, it's incumbent on everyone to lower the temperature, including the Greens who asked the question. So I think he saw it as an opportunity there to, and that's an old fight for the Prime Minister. You think about the BDS, did I get that right? Yep. The BDS sort of boycott that he's fought the left on for decades. Yes. So it's funny, I think he's positioned himself, the overreach on the right where the accusation was that he was personally responsible, an incredible thing to accuse of a Prime Minister. And then here on the left, he's trying, I think, to set a message to sort of the broader community that neither of those positions are legit.
Well, he's learned that this is not, this is not a football game.
Yeah, that was an important point.
You're not just all in on one side or the other, and
But of course, that sense of nuance tends to be lost when you've got people shouting, globalise the Intifada and things. Yeah. And a lot of people who are very strongly pro-Israel and Israel's right to defend themselves, certainly not anti-Semitic, do see, rightly or wrongly, we know the argument about he's just the Governor-General type of figure and not the part of the Netanyahu government. They did see Herzog representing a government with whose actions they disagree, even though...
Absolutely.
And so I think that kind of complicates the argument that old flights from overseas shouldn't be bought here. Having said that, I do think most of Australia, distressed as they were by those scenes in Sydney, would certainly not be on the side of the protesters.
No, but when you see those scenes of those sort of confrontations, when of course we know what happened in the Bondi terrorist atrocity, I want to show you a poll. This one's from JWS Research. It's about social division and how concerned Australians are right now. It's not surprising, but it is alarming. About 18 months ago, the number of people who felt we're extremely and very divided was something like 27%. Now it's 41%, and the somewhat divided numbers at another 45%. And only 7% are saying we're not divided. So we are a divided lot. That's how Australians are seeing it. And this is really the conundrum or the challenge that the Prime Minister faces, this social division.
It's not only that, it's, probably in retrospect he might not have invited Herzog, but he did it in that first few days. Well, actually, I suspect he might still have done it.
He also made a kind of, say, more progressive argument for inviting Herzog, which is this was an opportunity for dialogue to take up the killing of the aid worker in Gaza, Zomi Frankham, I wouldn't have been able to discuss that with him or advocate for these issues if I hadn't. So I think you saw him make that argument as well.
But I think the result of those scenes being, broadcast around the nation, very ugly scenes, I think Chris Minns was right saying, look, that they would have been worse if those had been allowed, those two groups, the mourners had been allowed to, that would have been far more distressing. But that will only, I think, exacerbate that community sense of the fraying of social fabric. And I do think that's what Australia needs to address, and by continuing to talk about, some of these nuanced positions and trying to stick to the centre. So it's going to be very interesting if Albanese continues on that line, which I think he needs to.
And the just sense that these words matter. They seem like glib phrases or innocent phrases, but they actually have real consequences and implications behind them. And I think many people in the community are getting an education in what those phrases mean, rather than just hearing them and thinking they're benign. Yeah, well, yes, thinking, feeling sorry for Palestinians or something. So, I think it's no wonder that I think the country's feeling more divided. OK, our panel, Natassia Chrysanthos, Jacob Greber and Jennifer Hewett, back shortly with some final observations. Time now for Mike Bowers and Talking Pictures.
I'm Mike Bowers and I'm photographer at large for the New Daily. I'm talking pictures this morning with cartoonist for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, the one and only Cathy Wilcox, and a very warm welcome, Cathy.
Good morning, Mike. It's very nice to be here.
Cathy, I'm not sure whether there were thrills, but there was definitely a spill, and the answer is Angus, apparently. Lovely Mark Knight cartoon, throwing another Liberal leader on the bubbies.
Yes.
This is a very disturbing depiction of him.
It could have been worse, is all I can say. Mark has captured the need for the Liberal Party to express its most masculine side.
They need that, don't they? Brett Lethbridge has a suggestion for an alternative leader of the Liberal Party. Liberal voters need a fresh face to leave them.
Look no further.
Yeah. Pistols at Dawn has been crossed out here by Harry Bruce from the Townsville Bulletin, and Pistols at 9-ish.
10 paces, turn and fire.
It's a bit sort of pantomime, isn't it? Behind you.
It's behind you.
And the hole is already in his foot. He may have exercised the pistol already there.
Yes.
Beautiful David Rowe with a little hat tip to our friend Jon Kudelka here as Valet John. It's the LNP downhill slalom. All the players here of Hastie and Taylor, Pauline Hanson.
And Hume and Hogan and Little Proud and Lee at the front. They're all cramming on top of and behind her, and they're going, oh my God, this is my Bradbury moment. Oh my God, this is my Bradbury moment.
Which just means you have to stay on your feet to win.
Yes.
Lovely Matt Golding here. What's a Liberal trigger?
John Howard in a tracksuit.
Tony in Speedos.
Malcolm in a leather jacket.
ScoMo with a ukulele.
Peter Dutton smiling.
Malcolm with the Constitution. Everyone awaiting a Liberal trigger.
I mean, think of the lobster. Putting it live in the hot water.
It's not nice.
Cruel. Yeah, you've got to be quick.
Yeah. Cathy, amidst all the calls for social cohesion, there was a fair bit of division as the Israeli president, Mr Herzog, visited Australia. Megan Herbert has drawn the social cohesion daisy being watered by the tears of Bondi and then trampled on the freedoms of expression here.
Black-booted riot squad of New South Wales stamping over while laying out the red carpet. It's an extremely poignant cartoon.
Yep, lovely cartoon by you here. That should socially cohere them nicely. Have you been cohered enough?
Yeah, no. That's right. No, we want more repression.
What do we want? Cohere.
What do we want? To be stopped from saying what we feel. When do we want it? Right away.
Right now. Finally, a very sad moment this week, Cathy. We lost one of the greats of political cartooning, the wonderful Jon Kudelka. This was his 2017 Walkley Award, which is the official government Uluru Statement response, which is just beautiful, with the Uluru rising out and the middle finger to to Australia, basically.
Ended up being kind of prescient as to how the Voice to Parliament was received.
This is my favourite. It's on the occasion when Julia Gillard unveiled her official portrait. I wonder when Kevin's going to, and we've got the Banksy shredding here.
I just love that he could make it look like it was just his first draft, but with a confidence and a lightness and a humour of line. So it didn't even kind of matter what he was saying because you were laughing because of how it looked.
This is Nobody Left Behind, which is a really hard... The simplicity of the cartoons belies the really serious message behind it.
Albo here, the band leader with Nobody Left Behind, and everybody's got that on their drums and their hats and stuff. And then who's that then? This person who can't pay the rent?
I just loved the way Jon was able to highlight the absolute absurdity of Australian politics.
And it was a sort of a defiant and uncompromising rejection of bullshit.
Well, to his wife Maggie and his children Kay and Oscar, and to his sisters Lisa and Anna, we offer our deepest condolences from Talking Pictures, and thanks so much, Jon, for all the laughs.
We will miss him.
We will.
Yeah, lovely tribute. Thank you, Mike and Cathy. And can I add our condolences to Jon's wife, Maggie, and the family. He will be so sorely missed. An incredible ability to skewer political hypocrisy and to make us laugh every day. Loved across the political aisle and the media landscape. So that's saying something, Jon. You will be missed. Right, let's get some final observations. Natassia.
The NDIS is one of the government's biggest budget pressures. They're trying to get it down. A key part of that is the huge number of children, young children, who have joined the scheme that was never expected. 2 years ago, the states agreed to take on extra responsibility for servicing kids with mild to moderate needs. This week is the week that those deals will hopefully get done. They're quite tight now between Health Minister Mark Butler and the states, but by the end of this week we could see how much money they're going to stump up and what exactly they're going to do in terms of providing, you know, physio supports, OT supports. That's 120,000 families, but also a really big political issue for the government and the budget.
So this week we should see the colour of their money and a bit more as to what this looks like. Very interesting. Jacob.
For the policy nerds out there, on Friday, as we were all focused on the Liberal Party, the government quietly slipped out its review into carbon leakage. Fascinating bit of work by Professor Frank Iozzo, very credible economist. It's arguing that we bring in what's called a CBAM, a carbon border adjustment mechanism. In the context of what we just heard from the Liberal Party about being against taxes, fascinating debate. The purpose of this is to protect Australian manufacturers and those jobs. Because we're making them decarbonise, we have to make them, put them on an equal footing with foreign companies that import in that don't have those constraints. Very, very interesting little political wedge that got slipped under the door on Friday.
Yes, that is. We'll come back to that one, I'm sure. Jennifer.
The focus on the Liberals overwhelmed a also very significant story, and that is the criminality and corruption of the CFMEU, particularly in Victoria, costing taxpayers at least $15 billion, probably more, and all sorts of big public projects, and the complete failure of the Labor Party to overlook this, to actually deal with it in any way, really, effectively. So the question is whether the Liberals will actually be able to get their act together to prosecute this effectively now that the public understands it costs them too.
Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. Finally, you might have missed it, but Senate estimates was in full swing during the week, and amidst the usual grilling from senators, a very modern solution which could do away with the questions once and for all. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching.
What percentage of the department's budget is spent on the committee review process, and how many cases per year go through a committee process?
I can't tell you the exact amount that...
I can use ChatGPT to answer that. ChatGPT.
You might want to turn your device off.
Might save us all a bit of time, Senator.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.